I'm going to try to multitask here and get my PowerPoint up at the same time that I'm talking a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So our topic, opportunities on the horizon, I think the metaphor Dr. Yuen brought up earlier about the CU buffs could be a fitting one as well. I wore my CU buff tie as well. You know, we've been through some tough times, but you know, there's reason to be optimistic for the future. New coach, headed to a new conference, and indeed the coming decade I think we can have reason to hope is going to be better than the last one. And I think in real estate we can spend a lot of time thinking about what went wrong, why did it go wrong, when's it going to stop going wrong, and certainly we've seen our share of that in our firm and with our clients. But it's kind of exciting to start to look ahead a little bit and say, taking a decade or so, what's that going to look like and where are those opportunities going to be? So I'm going to focus my talk specifically on infill and redevelopment opportunities. DRCOG, which is the Denver Regional Council of Governments, MetroVision 2030 says that in the 9-county metro area, at least 20% of new development is supposed to be infill or redevelopment. They're working on MetroVision 2035 right now, and I actually understand they're going to call it MetroVision 2035S, which you might think is sport or supercharged or something, but if you've been around government at all lately, you'd know that S has to be sustainability. So MetroVision 2035 is going to have even more focus on sustainability, environmentally friendly development, that type of thing. So I think what we're going to see is that of the new development that's going to happen, an even greater percentage is going to be infill and redevelopment. Greenfield development, sprawl, going out, taking farmland, open space land on the periphery of communities and creating new development. There's still going to be some of it, but there's going to be less and less. Certainly in Boulder County, the percentage is going to be a lot higher than 20%. So as investors, developers, if we're thinking about where are we going to find opportunities in the next decade, I would submit that many of the best opportunities are going to be infill or redevelopment. Why do planners love infill and redevelopment? Conserves resources. You're going to use the infrastructure that's already there. You're going to use the land more efficiently. It allows compact, higher density development, supports mixed use, which we all know government and planners love, and new urbanism really isn't all that new anymore, but we're starting to see more of it and see more wide acceptance of it. Supports alternative modes of transportation. Absolutely a big focus for government and planners everywhere. How are we going to deal with getting people from point A to point B? And if people live close to where they work, if they play close to where they live, all those things are going to support fewer cars on the road, less congestion, and creates more livable, sustainable communities. All pretty basic stuff, no big surprises there. But because planners and politicians, for that matter, love infill and redevelopment and they want to see a focus on that, they're spending their time thinking about how can we change our rules and regulations? How can we put structures in place that will encourage people to do this and not to sprawl and do greenfield development? So as a developer investor, why should you love infill or redevelopment? Why should you look at those opportunities? First of all, because, as we know, the planners and the politicians love it. And so the rules they're putting in place are guiding you to go there. I think developers are people who say, if you tell me the rules, I understand what the rules are, I'll figure out if I can make money, and if I can, then that's what I'm going to do. And so as the planners are effective in putting things in place that encourage what they want to see and they want to see those outcomes, developers and smart investors are going to be right there to help make it happen. But maybe more significantly, oftentimes we're talking about greater development potential. Most of the time in an infill or a redevelopment project, we're going to take a higher density, higher intensity use than what has been there before, and maybe than what's around it immediately. Because you're going to be able to use the existing infrastructure, fewer off-site costs. And I think in Boulder, we see an awful lot of our clients are smaller entrepreneurial investors and developers. And these sites are unique. There isn't a cookie cutter that's going to work for one site is necessarily going to work for the next one. And so for smaller entrepreneurs, there are phenomenal opportunities. And some opportunities to do some really interesting creative projects. And if done right, potential for higher returns. Not to say there aren't challenges. assembling the land can be really difficult. You know, we see, especially in Boulder, a lot of times very fractured ownership. It's been in the paper a little bit, some of the city's efforts to try to get something going at Diagonal Plaza, a shopping center that I think a lot of people would feel like is ready for some coordinated redevelopment. The land ownership is really fractured and it's challenging. It's hard to put together a critical enough mass of land to really make that work. And oftentimes the land costs can be very high, particularly when there's already viable businesses and uses in place. As a developer coming in and looking at that, the existing owner wants to be paid for what's there today, even if your plan is to remove it. Neighbors. You know, when you're doing greenfield development, you're going out on the periphery, you probably don't have many neighbors. And if you do, they might be really happy that you showed up. Inside communities, when we're doing redevelopment and infill, oftentimes the neighbors aren't so sure they want to see what you're planning to put there. And so you have to go into that with a particular mindset about working with them and in a cooperative fashion and having some dialogue and maybe having to make some compromises. And the entitlement process can be challenging. Certainly in Boulder, we know the process isn't quick, can be pretty rigorous, can be pretty expensive. Environmental issues, oftentimes inside of communities and urban settings, there's existing contamination that's going to have to be dealt with. But I'll tell you, that's not as scary as what a lot of people think it is. There are types of contamination, absolutely. You go through, you do your environmental reports. There's sometimes the message comes back and really what it says is, hey, you don't want to buy this property. But more often there's a solution, and it's finding who's the responsible party, how can we get them to pay for it, or if you're going to have to pay for it as part of your project, how can you get the seller and the people who are already on the hook to contribute for that? You can certainly have historic preservation issues. Are you going to be able to remove the structures that are there to the extent that you need to in order to build what you want to build? Financing, you know, certainly in the market today, financing for any kind of development or construction is challenging, but even in a normal financing market, financing for infill and redevelopment can be a little more challenging, particularly when you have mixed uses. And sometimes market acceptance is a challenge. Is the market ready for what you'd like to bring? Some prime areas I think we're really going to see opportunities are going to be downtown and central business districts, and I don't mean just Boulder. I think if you look at downtown Louisville, I was talking with Bonnie Starr earlier, there's exciting things happening down there. I think Longmont's trying to get it going. They're maybe not quite there yet, but it's moving in the right direction. Lafayette's done good things. I think all our communities, we're going to see that central business district as it becomes more vibrant and alive. You're going to find more and more opportunities where you can add value by taking something that's old and tired and maybe past its useful life and turning it around. I'm extremely bullish on areas around CU. If you look at CU's growth plan for the Boulder campus, we're going to have a lot more kids than are there today. And we know they come with money in their pockets, they need a place to live, they need to eat, they need to be entertained. We're already seeing some of those things happen, and I'll show you a specific project here a little bit later. But absolutely, I think there are going to be opportunities there, and other universities as well. Aging shopping centers, talked about Diagonal Plaza, I think there are others. Certainly along transit corridors, I think this is fundamental, and maybe David will get into this, the city's policies in Boulder, and I think all the communities are really looking at where is transit, how are we moving people from point A to point B, how can we put more density and more intense development along there, and then I would say near hospitals. You look at what's going to happen in Boulder with the transition of our hospital, I think that's going to create some opportunities. Couple just sample projects that I wanted to show you, give you an example of what it could look like. So this area map's maybe a little bit difficult to make sense of, but if you see the green roof buildings there, that's basically where we are. So that's the Millennium, and this is across the creek on Taft Drive. On the right-hand side of the slide, north and south is 28th Street, and on the left you've got Folsom. So this is the Carillon. People who've been in Boulder for a long time probably remember it as Taft Towers. It's been a senior housing community or was a nursing home in its prior life. And some great developers, clients of ours, MGL Partners, had an opportunity to take this site, which really, the old improvements were reaching the end of their useful life, and it really wasn't sustainable for how it was being used. This is the building before as they took a look at it. And you can see it's kind of a fairly monolithic 1960s kind of a look, but there's a huge asset in that photo for anybody that thinks about Boulder. you can pretty quickly tell that building's taller than 55 feet. So you're sure not tearing that down. But it was certainly ready to be freshened up a little bit. And so after adaptive reuse of the tower and some removal of other improvements on the site, this is what it looks like now. It's leasing right now, and it's gorgeous. So it's an independent senior living community. If you know somebody that's looking, it's a place I wouldn't mind living. I need to get my reservation in there, I think. Here's another example. This is on Baseline Road, right at Highway 36. So it's on the east side of 36, south side of Baseline. This is a project where these 3 existing pad buildings, and I'll show you what those uses were: gas station, a restaurant, and an auto repair shop. Again, they're individual pad buildings. You can kind of see sort of surrounded by parking, set back away from the street, not particularly pedestrian friendly, not a very intense use of the land. But this is right near CU. You've got Williams Village on one side and the main campus on the other. And so after these buildings get removed early next year, eventually we're going to see something like that, which is brought up to the street, much better pedestrian connections, the parking is hidden behind, and it'll accommodate 8 businesses, restaurants, student-oriented retail, things that really fit that neighborhood and bring a much more attractive streetscape. So I think those are just a few examples of what we might see as opportunities out there. And I think more and more for savvy investors and developers, if you're willing to take a look and think about it, analyze the zoning that's there, there are going to be a huge number of opportunities in that area. So with that, I'll pass it back.